Hello and welcome. Becoming one of the leading media celebrities in the Middle East wasn't enough for this young Saudi woman. She took on the role of activist and goodwill ambassador for the United Nations and was named Global Young Leader by the World Economic Forum. This week on 101, meet television host and activist Muna AbuSulayman. Her perspective as a modern young Saudi with a global presence has made Muna AbuSulayman the ideal candidate for many of the tasks she has undertaken. As Executive Director of the Kingdom Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Kingdom Holding Company run by Saudi billionaire businessman Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, she has the responsibility of bridging cultures and religions through strategic projects and humanitarian assistance. This ties into the work Muna AbuSulayman does as the first Saudi woman to be appointed as a Goodwill Ambassador by the United Nations Development Programme and as a Global Young Leader of the World Economic Forum. On top of that, she co-hosts one of the Middle East's most popular programs focused on social issues, Kalam Nawa'im, making her not only visible but active as a prominent young Arab woman. Muna, it's great to talk with you. You've got a lot on your plate. You're a media personality, you're a Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations, the UNDP, you're an Executive Director for a charity, the Kingdom Foundation of Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. I guess more importantly, you're a mother of 2 daughters. What is your goal as a Saudi woman, a high-profile Saudi woman? What is it you'd like to achieve?
I think one of the important things that have happened recently is that by being appointed an ambassador for the United Nations, UNDP, and also as YGL, or Young Global Leader for the World Economic Forum, is that I've become a spokesperson for my country, whether I like it or not. And I take that very seriously. So I've been invited to give a lot of lectures or meet with people all over the world, and I try to do my best to accommodate these requests so that people see a different side of Saudi Arabia. What is being portrayed in the media many times is not the Saudi Arabia I live in. And I want to show that there does exist opportunities for women, that we can accomplish things, that we do things. It might be a little bit more difficult than other places, but it does exist. The opportunities do exist.
It makes me wonder, though, as you say, there are opportunities, but what sort of glass ceiling you face as an Arab woman, as a Muslim woman, but perhaps even as a Saudi woman?
The glass ceiling does exist. Sometimes even it's a brick wall. It's not even a glass ceiling. Mostly in the upper management. We don't have a lot of decision makers who are women, final decision makers. We have a lot of partnerships. For example, in universities, we'd have the rector who's a female for the women's college, but then the male rector would have overriding authority in the end. The other thing is that pay scale in the private sector for women is not as equal as men. So men do get paid a little bit more than women. I don't know what the reasons are, because sometimes they say that women take longer vacations, etc. I don't think that exists in the private sector.
It happens in the West as well, though, doesn't it?
It does, but the thing is, in the West, women make 80%, for example, in the U.S. to the dollar. But in the government sector, that's also similar in the U.S. But in Saudi Arabia, in the government, men and women are being paid equally. So they get the same exact benefits. It doesn't matter, the gender doesn't matter. But the private sector, there is a little bit of a difference.
What are the biggest challenges you face? What do you think are the biggest obstacles you personally have to overcome because of your background?
Well, there's 2 things. Because of my background, I've lived in the States for a very long time, and so therefore I'm a bit more Americanized than other Saudi women. And it gives me an advantage that I can walk in both shoes, as they say, but at the same time, when you're in the other country, you feel a little bit foreign. You never feel at home in either place anymore. That's a challenge. The other thing is that life-work balance. I think for a certain time in my life, work did become the #1 priority, and I was taking on too many projects. And then I realized that this just isn't right. You have to really balance it because you only live once.
You live in Riyadh most of the time in Saudi Arabia. How do men react to your very public profile?
There's 2 reactions. One, people who are, doesn't really matter. They don't even notice it. And there are people who are against it. I mean, there are people who think that women shouldn't be such a public figure. And when somebody is resistant to that idea, you can't have a dialogue with them. But I do have to admit, they're really in the minority. I mean, I can count on one hand how many complaints I really got about being a public figure versus how many encouraging words I've gotten from all over Saudi Arabia about my role.
You were born in America. You were born in Philadelphia, in fact, and raised for your early years in America. And, what do you remember of those early years? What were your earliest memories there?
Yeah, the city of brotherly love. Philadelphia was not as advanced as it is right now. It was still a very scary place. We were living very close to the University of Pennsylvania, where my father went. Then I moved back when I was around 10 years old to Virginia. I moved back from Saudi Arabia to Virginia in the United States. And that was quite different from Philadelphia. It was in the suburbs. We had a great educational system. People were very civilized towards us. It was very cosmopolitan also because it was very close to Washington, D.C. So I had a great time in the U.S.
Your father's an Islamic thinker, and he's very experienced with that side of the religion. How much does he try to impose that on you and your brothers and your sisters?
Well, I mean, of course, being an Islamic thinker, he's very progressive. So I think one of the things that really helped me is that he doesn't discuss superficial acts or, just rituals. He always discusses why is this important, what is the reason, the root of the action. And therefore, for example, we grew up learning that the most important element of Islam, or the central element of Islam, is justice. Justice to everybody, even if it means that you're unjust to yourself because you are giving out justice to others, what they deserve. And so therefore, that was very important growing up, not being caught up in just acts, but really knowing why you're doing them. And that changes your life because it makes everything has meaning.
What about your mother? I mean, I know she didn't work in the traditional sense of the company. She was busy raising a family. What impact did that have on your character? What sort of characteristics did you get from her?
My mom was a housewife. I mean, she supported my father. My father traveled a lot. My father was always involved with his, intellectual work when he was doing his dissertation, when he was, building his think tank. So he was always very busy, and my mom was there supporting him. But my mom was an excellent mother. I mean, I learned what it means to really care about your family. She woke up every single day and made our breakfast and was there making sure that we ate it every single day, not missing one day in my whole life. I don't remember my mom, whether she was sick, whether she was tired, not being there in the morning, making sure that I ate my breakfast before I left. Every time I came from home, she was there waiting for us. We would have, snacks. She'd make sure that we did our homework. It gave you a sense of security that you don't really realize the value of except when you have your own kids.
Did she, was she religious? Did she impose a lot of sort of religious rules on you?
My mom is actually more conservative than my dad, in a way, because she does care about the hijab, for example. So she was concerned that we would have to, for example, pray on time rather than, whenever we felt like it or whenever we had time, which that's what happened when you grow up in the West. She wanted us to wear the scarf, so she was very instrumental in, shopping with us for clothes that were appropriate. So she did play a role in making us outwardly conservative, I think.
Now, unfortunately, you joined a club that is growing across the world and in Saudi Arabia, the club of divorcees. And I wonder how your parents reacted to that. I mean, I guess it's not as common, obviously, in Arab culture as it is in the West, but it's a growing trend, isn't it?
It's actually quite growing, and it's very, it's a matter of concern because I think it's now 30% of marriages end in divorce, which is a very high number when you think about Saudi Arabia as being a country that really cares about families and making sure that children are growing in a stable environment. Now, for me, my divorce was perhaps a bit more unusual than when you think about Saudi Arabia. For example, my parents supported me totally. They said, whatever is your decision, take your time, think about it. We're not going to interfere in you making the decision. And actually, my father told my brothers and sisters not to talk to me about it so that I make my own decision, not being influenced by other people's feelings. And once I did have the divorce, I mean, I worked on TV, I traveled a lot, so there was no change in my lifestyle before divorce and after divorce, which isn't always the case for women in Saudi Arabia. A lot of times when you get divorced, people are much more concerned about you, and perhaps in trying to show love, they would actually sort of suffocate.
How has your own experience going through divorce and the background you've had from America to Saudi and back through America, how has it affected the way you will bring up your own daughters? How has it affected the way you treat them in terms of religious guidance, in terms of sense of freedoms or empowerment as women?
I'm going to tell you something, you're going to laugh about this, but my role models in my divorce were Demi Moore and Bruce Willis.
Well,
because I remember when I was, young and they were getting divorced, they would go to premieres together and they would really have this kind of relationship. And I thought that was always, a very good thing that they were friends afterwards. And I actually did do this with my ex-husband, so we were very good friends, and we, share parenting and custody. And for example, my divorce never went to court. We were able to solve all the issues beforehand very cordially between us, and we didn't have to go to a judge to do this. He fully supports the kids, and it's been wonderful post-divorce. Our relationship may not have been as great during the marriage, though.
And I know you've had many, many proposals for marriage since, especially in Saudi culture, a lot of men make formal approaches. So, of course, you're very much...
they make approaches to the family.
All right. And I know you got engaged for a while. It didn't work out. But what does it say about the way male-female relationships are going in the Saudi culture, in the Arab world in general, I guess? I mean, in the Western world, people often don't put that much weight on the fact someone is divorced or they have kids or anything. How is it affecting your life as an Arab woman?
Well, the idea of marriage after divorce is quite difficult because, first of all, there's the issue of trust. You have a lot of baggage that you need to deal with, and I think sometimes people jump into a second marriage not realizing that they didn't deal appropriately with the baggage, so they get divorced a second time, and I've seen this with several of my friends. The other thing is that the other face of the coin is that you grow up tremendously. You suddenly have gone through a very traumatic experience, and if you do actually pass through it, you gain a lot of strength. Getting married after a divorce, I think, is, for me, problematic because it's difficult to trust again. It's difficult to think about finding somebody who believes in the partnership that I'm looking for. This is one of the things about Saudi Arabia, is that men don't approach marriage in a partnership with a partnership mentality.
I think women would argue that happens everywhere.
Well, perhaps in Saudi Arabia it's a bit more severe than other places. So I think what I'm looking for perhaps is quite rare. Well,
you had a fantastic career, you are having a fantastic career, and I want to ask you more about that in just a moment. We're going to take a short break here, back with more One-on-One in just a moment.